as we go. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I am doing this presentation from home, which is awesome because I won't be interrupted by phone calls or anything at work, but you may hear dogs barking in the background. I love them. They are hanging out on the couch and in a different room, but they are loud. So I apologize in advance if you hear them barking. So let me go ahead and share this with you and we can go ahead and begin. I am somebody who gets incredibly distracted. So I'm going to ask that you put any questions that you have in the chat and I will take a look at them at the end. Because if not, I will go on tangents like no one's business. And I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I get through all of the information that you guys need me to get through. So please feel free to throw it in the chat. I did throw my email in there and I'll do it again at the end in case anybody missed that. But let me go ahead and begin. And then another thing about me is I get incredibly distracted by looking at myself in the little things. So I'm going to go ahead and shut off my camera as well. No, I'm not because I can't do it from the screen. That's totally fine. All right. So I am going to be welcoming you to Core 40 with, oh, it says fall. This is spring. It's not fall 2022. It is spring of 2023. But this is the principles of advocacy. So we're going to be going over all types of stuff relating to the advocacy work that you do every day. A little bit about me. I graduated from Purdue University back in 2016, but I've been with Fairhaven since 2015. Started out as a victim advocate, as a volunteer, worked my way up through and ran our crisis response team for about 4 years, transitioned into anti-trafficking work for the last 2.5, where I have been working with local and state coalitions and resources to build an anti-trafficking program for Fairhaven. But recently in January, I was transitioned into the client services director position at Fairhaven, where I now am a little bit removed from our actual direct client services, but I am overseeing all of the different entities that make up our direct services team. I should also mention that I work at Fairhaven Rape Crisis Center. Fairhaven serves Lake Porter and LaPorte counties up in Northwest Indiana. We are the only standalone rape crisis center in our state. So I want to just acknowledge that and recognize that from the beginning, that a lot of the people who provide direct services to sexual assault survivors and human trafficking survivors work in a dual service agency. We do not. We work solely with survivors of sexual trauma. Of course, other intimate partner violence does intertwine in between all of those different victimizations, as you all well know, but our primary focus is sexual violence, whether that be through sexual assault or human trafficking or both. I've been training for Core 40 now since 2018. This is one of my favorite things I get to do every year, twice a year. So I'm really thankful for ICASA HT for asking me to come back. I'm also extensively trained in crisis intervention through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. I'm literally one class away from being a certified crisis interventionist. So a lot of the work that I do has been adapted by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And I definitely will reference them later on in this presentation. So the objectives of this training is that we are going to discuss the myths and the realities of the role of a victim advocate. We have to talk about the bad and what people think of the negative connotations that come with being a victim advocate before we can talk about the positive impact that we make every day. I'm going to go over the basic tenets of advocacy and what it means to be a victim advocate. We're going to just briefly discuss the code of ethics for advocacy. We're going to spend some time on the SAFE-R model, which is adapted by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. The SAFE-R model is a foundation of all crisis intervention that we do at Fairhaven. And we're going to talk about the different types of advocacy because there's different types of advocacy. So before I begin, I want to go over what the negative myths and beliefs are, because this is stuff that I've heard. These are things that you've heard. These are what sometimes our allied professionals think of us, and it is our job to educate our community to let them know who we are as advocates and why we're important in the community. Some negative myths and beliefs include that advocates really don't serve a purpose. We are just there to hold a hand. While we do hold victims' hands, it's an important part of our job if that is what they deem that they need in that moment. We do a lot more while continuously being in that survivor's corner. So we're going to break down all of the different things that, all the different roles that an advocate plays for our survivors. But we do a lot more than just hold a hand. Advocates are the bleeding hearts for victims, and frankly, we just don't have time for the touchy-feely work. While this is a myth, it's also a little bit of a fact. It's kind of double-sided. A lot of our allied professionals that we have to work with collaboratively in order to support these survivors really don't have time for the touchy-feely work. We've got nurses who need to do their job and collect the best evidence and provide medical care. We've got officers who need to do an investigation and get the evidence that they need to be able to put away the bad guy. And then we've got prosecutors whose sole job is to try and go in front of a judge and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is the person who did this horrible, terrible thing. They don't have time to be sitting down and putting these clients back together, walking through that path of recovery with them, but we do. And that's what's beautiful about our work. Advocates will impede the investigation. This one has been something that I have faced in my now almost 8 years of doing this work. Some people believe that we will go in, tell people how to do their jobs, tell victims what to say. And as you all know, as service providers, that couldn't be further than the truth. And I will explain that a little bit more throughout my presentation. And why do advocates want to be in the room? It's not like they do anything. Like I said, we're going to talk through that and talk about all the different things that an advocate can and does for our survivors and why the role of an advocate is so important. So now that we've talked about the negative, I want to speak on the positive impact. This comes from a research study done by Dr. Rebecca Campbell, who I'm sure you guys will hear reference throughout your time in Core 40. She's been such a pioneer in neurobiology of trauma of sexual assault survivors. And this comes from a study in 2006, because believe it or not, nobody has actually done a research study on this since 2006. And that's cited there at the bottom. But in that research study, it was found that survivors of sexual violence with advocates were 59% more likely to have police reports taken than survivors who did not have an advocate. And those survivors only had reports taken 41% of the time. Survivors of sexual violence with victim advocates were 24% more likely to have their case investigated further. And survivors of sexual violence with advocates were 86% more likely to receive information on HIV prophylactic treatment for STIs and additional community resources. So again, we're going to unpack all of this and talk about the role of a victim advocate throughout this entire presentation. But through this research study, you can see that there is actual evidence to prove the importance of having a victim advocate present. And if any of you know somebody who does research studies who wants to duplicate this and make this happen again in like now times, that would be great, because I think we need something a little bit more current. So what is an advocate? An advocate wears many different hats. The first and foremost, the most important one is that we respect confidentiality. We believe and validate experiences of the survivors that we are serving. We acknowledge the injustice that they have experienced, that they might even continue to experience throughout the judicial system. We respect their autonomy. We help them plan for their safety, whether that be a physical safety plan, an emotional safety plan, whatever that may look like. And we provide them access to all the different community resources. So this is just a little image that I wanted to put up here, but we are going to break down each and every one of these individually. In order to talk about what a victim advocate is, though, we have to talk about what a victim advocate is not, because it's very easy to get wrapped up in the experience of this client that you're serving and what has actually happened and wanting to know more information. We are all human beings. We are all curious Georges in our real lives, I'm sure. If you're anything like me, at least you are. So you want to genuinely know what is going on in all of this information. But when you are in the role of a victim advocate, you have to recognize that you are not a police officer or an investigator. It is not your job to look things up. It is not your job to find out the information or find any evidence or anything like that. We have excellent officers in our state. We want to leave that job to the officers and the detectives who are investigating these cases. We are not a sexual assault nurse examiner or a doctor. So I've sat through probably 200 to 300 exams. I know it's a big number, but I've been doing this for a long time. At this point, I know almost every step of the exam, how to do it, what's to look, like what it looks like and those types of things. But I dropped out of nursing school. You don't want me doing the exam, and nor would I ever be the person who's going to tell a nurse what to do or anything like that. I, in that room, have no medical history, and I'm going to refer all questions to the medical professionals in the room. So even though a victim may present with something that you've seen before, you have to make sure you recognize, I am not a nurse examiner or a doctor in this room. I need to make sure that I'm getting them the help they need by getting in contact with that nurse or doctor. I am not a prosecutor or a lawyer in that room. So even though I've seen a bunch of cases go through the judicial system, I don't know what determinations they go through to see if this is going to be charged or not. If this case is going to go to trial, is it going to plea? If this person is a level 3 felon or a level 6 felon, I have no idea. So we're going to leave that to the prosecutors and the lawyers. A lot of times our victims are going to ask us, is he going to go to jail? Is this person going to spend the rest of their life in prison? I don't have that answer. And it's okay to say that to your survivors. And we're not a judge or jury. That's the beautiful thing about being a victim advocate. I don't have to have any proof in order to support the survivors that I'm serving. It is not my job to find beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened or did not happen. And it helps us as survivors to be able to not have that and just be able to support our survivors no matter what. So this is where I touch on the multidisciplinary approach. So you are going to learn in your Core 40 what a sexual assault response team is, and everything that makes up that. I'm sure you guys got a training that goes into depth on that. There is an Indiana code that mandates every county have a sexual assault response team or be connected to a sexual assault response team. The sexual assault response team should be compiled of people from the prosecutor's office, law enforcement officers, victim advocates, and your nurse examiners. And the whole goal of a sexual assault response team is to provide compassionate, comprehensive evidence collection, emotional support, information, assistance, and investigation of incidents of sexual assault. We are up here in Lake County. That's the sexual assault response team that Fairhaven is connected to. Our executive director, Kelly, actually co-chairs our sexual assault response team and has helped write all of the different best practices and standards for our county. In Lake County, we are the second biggest county in our state. So we've got a whole lot of towns and different jurisdictions up here. So we've actually taken our sexual assault response team and broken it down into districts. So that those districts can meet individually once a quarter, and then we all come together once a year to kind of just talk amongst each other. But up here in Lake County, we've got some very, very low socioeconomic areas where we have very high crime rates. And then we've got some higher socioeconomic communities where there are lower crime rates and different types of crimes. So we've really broken down our districts so that we can focus on the very specific needs of each individual town as much as we can. Instead of trying to put, I think we have like 14 or 15 municipalities up here, trying to put them all in one room and expecting everybody to be having the same problems, which just isn't the case up here. Okay, see, that was tangent number 1. Sorry. All right. So what does all this mean? Why do we work in a multidisciplinary approach? This is a beautiful image of what is supposed to be a highway. So I live up here in northern Indiana, where we have 8094 that runs through our area. And 8094, if you've never been on it, is a 4, sometimes 5-lane highway. And everything on 8094 can run great and smooth and awesome if everybody stays in their lane, abides by the traffic rules, does the speed limit, and doesn't start getting crazy. If everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, 8094 will flow beautifully, wonderfully, amazing. The problem is that when people start crossing into other lanes, start speeding or slowing way down, start weaving in and out of traffic and bobbing in between all of these different lanes, accidents occur. Traffic jams happen. People get really mad and road rage occurs. And that's what happens when we don't stay in our lane as a victim advocate. So we have to work collaboratively with all of these different agencies and roles in this investigation for the survivor. So we want to make sure that as an advocate, we're staying in our lane. We're going to have the medical professionals stay in their lane, law enforcement stay in their lane. And as long as everybody stays in their lane, it's going to go beautifully for our survivor. They're going to feel as supported and loved as we can possibly make them feel throughout this entire experience. This is the VA Code of Conduct that was adopted by NOVA. NOVA is the National Organization for Victims Assistance. There is, NOVA is a huge organization and they have a plethora of information if you want to know more. They are also one of the places where you can get credentialed as a victim advocate. But the Code of Conduct basically states that we want to act as a victim advocate. We want to act with integrity, treat all victims and survivors of their crime with dignity and compassion, and uphold the principles of justice for the accused as much as possible, or the accuser as much as possible. So again, just treating everybody with dignity and respect goes a very long way. But as a victim advocate, it's the utmost important to while you're working with these survivors. Because I guess that was a very long pause in between that. Victim advocates, we provide the continuum of care for survivors. So you all know that our justice system, no matter how flawless we try to make it, is riddled with flaws. COVID has only amplified those flaws in terms of the length that some of our cases last. I've got cases on my list here that have dated back to 2018 that are still not done and over with because COVID put everything on pause for like 3 years. Our courts are only just starting to catch up, but it's not like our courts are just trying or dealing with sexual violence cases. They also are dealing with all of the other crimes that happened during COVID as well. So we are able to provide this continuum of care during this entire ordeal because I've referenced, I keep saying it, we work with awesome allied professionals. And even if every single person does their job, eventually their job is done. So this crime occurs, this victim comes forward and makes a police report. This officer, detective team, they can be fantastic, great, wonderful. They are entirely victim-centered, trauma-informed, ask all the right questions, none of the wrong ones, make this victim feel heard and seen and not judged. And they do a fantastic job, get every single bit of evidence in the entire world for this case. But once this case is handed over to prosecution, the investigation closes, that officer is done. They've done their job. And then we can have an amazing nurse where this survivor goes into the hospital. They are met with compassion and empathy. They are provided all of the resources that they need. They are treated with dignity and respect. They do not feel re-victimized after they go through the medical forensic exam. This nurse is fantastic, top notch, top of the line. But once that exam is done and that victim walks out of the hospital, their job is done and they go away. And then we can have the best prosecutor in the entire world where they are able to secure fantastic charges. They have great evidence because everybody's done their job, and the perpetrator of this crime gets locked away for 50 years. Awesome, wonderful, amazing. And then that prosecutor goes away. The case is closed. All of our allied professionals have done their job. They've done their job well. But where does that leave our victim? Everybody else in that team has just left because they have other victims to serve. They are not anybody, they've done their job. The advocate is the person who gets to walk alongside them every step of the way, not only while supporting them throughout this entire process, but also supporting them on the emotional journey that recovery is. I've been able and privileged to walk the journey of recovery myself and alongside some of the strongest men and women that I know through our agency. And the journey of healing looks different for every single survivor that walks through our door. So if we have survivors that need our support 2, 3, 4 years later, we get to be that for them. Whereas you're not going to have a law enforcement officer walking that path with them because that's not their role. So as you can see, the advocate is very important in the spectrum of how the case goes and beyond, let's be honest. So I am speaking about my experience and all of this stuff through the eyes of a community-based advocate. A community-based advocate works for the victim while practicing collaboratively with other professionals. And the beautiful thing about being a community-based advocate is that I cannot be compelled to testify. There are also agency-based advocates in our state who are employed by law enforcement agencies and or the prosecutor's office, who work for their agency to provide services to victims who are being worked with by that agency. And agency-based advocates are not covered under the same privileged communication that community-based advocates are. So there is that little difference. Community-based advocates work collaboratively with all of the agencies, but we work for the victim. Agency-based advocates work with victims who are working with only that agency, and they work for that agency. This breaks down that privileged communication a little bit more. The IC code is right there. It's 35376. That IC code has come in handy for quite a few of my advocates on my team. We actually have that IC code on the back of our badges, just so that if there's ever an issue and somebody needs to remember that number off the top of their head, they're able to. But throughout this, I'm not a lawyer, so it's law talk. You can read the statute. I encourage you to. There are 4 big pieces of this legislation. It says that the privileged communication is the victim's right, and it gives the victim control. So they hold their privilege, and if they want us to speak to somebody on their behalf, it is up to them, and they have the ability to break that privilege and give us a written release of information for us to speak on their behalf to somebody, but only with their permission. And why we give this to our victims is that it makes their disclosure safe. I am a survivor of sexual violence and domestic violence, so there has been many times throughout my journey where I have said the words like, it's all my fault, if I wouldn't have done this, if I would have done this, X, Y, and Z. And it's just me. I know as a survivor, thriver, and overcomer of this that none of this was my fault. I know that. But while you're processing things, sometimes those little things slip out. And if somebody overhears that and somehow it makes its way to a defense attorney, the defense attorney can easily swing that and be like, well, look, she already admitted it. She confessed this was all her fault. She's the one who made this happen. We don't want that happening. We want our survivors to have, went a little fire. We want our survivors to have somebody safe in their corner that they can come and talk to and process through all of those emotions with. And that is what a victim advocate is able to do. A victim advocate is able to sit alongside somebody while they discuss, if I wouldn't have done that, if I should have done that, if this, X, Y, and Z, all these different things. And we're able to help dispel some of the myths that they are, or the lies that their brain is telling them about what has happened to them. Of course, I just want to acknowledge that privileged communication will of course be broken for the big 3. If we are made aware of child abuse, elderly abuse, or differently abled abuse, neglect, anything like that, we will report that to DCS, APS, the appropriate authorities. If we are made aware of suicidal ideation or intent, we will make that aware. We will, call the proper authorities for that. If we are made aware of homicidal ideation or intent, we will go forward and tell the authorities about that. Of course, while breaking that confidentiality for any of those three, we do it with dignity. We make sure that we don't give any more information than it is needed to preserve life or safety. However, we will break it for those three. And I just wanted to make that known. Community-based advocates, again, under this statute says that we cannot be compelled to testify for or against the sexual assault victim while acting in the role as a victim advocate. This also protects all of our communication, our case notes, the client's file, any of the work that we do with our clients. We do work under the empowerment model, at least at Fairhaven, and I think all advocates probably should work under the empowerment model because the empowerment model is beautiful. It is the process by which individuals and groups gain power, access to resources, and control over their own lives. We get to stand back and say, here are all of your options. We're going to help you figure out which option is best for you. But ultimately, whatever that decision is, that decision lies with that survivor. This helps our survivor gain the ability to achieve their highest personal goals and control of their life. Because we all know sexual violence is all about power and control. So by empowering our survivors, they get to gain power back in their lives. I'm going to just briefly touch on the victims' rights that went into effect in July of 2020, I believe. There is a handout right down there. I put our Lake County SART's website up where we have the brochure on our website for all of our allied professionals and for any survivors who are looking. But the three that I wanted to highlight is that the victim who is subject to a medical forensic exam or an interview by a law enforcement officer in relation to injuries, trauma, or an investigation resulting from a sexual assault receives these victims' rights. They retain their rights regardless of whether they've agreed to participate in criminal or civil proceedings. So they do not have to be working with law enforcement in order for these rights to be upheld. And they do not have to consent to a medical forensic exam in order for them to receive these rights as well. Basically, if they are a victim in the state of Indiana, they get these rights, whether they want to go forward with charges or not. Well, not charges, but if they want to go forward with making a police report, getting a forensic exam or not. And all victims have the right to be informed of their rights as a victim under Indiana law before any medical forensic exam happens or before any law enforcement officer interviews them. That is what the statute states. And again, if you guys do not have these pamphlets, I really recommend you keep them on deck. We've literally gotten probably about 20,000 of them printed over the course of the last year or two. We hand them out like candy to every single agency that works with survivors. We keep them in our office all over the place so that any survivor that walks through our door is made aware of their rights as a victim in the state of Indiana. We also provide them to all of our local jurisdictions. So all of our police departments, all of our hospitals, the prosecutor's office, everybody has the victims' rights brochures from Fairhaven. We give them out to everybody. So I recommend you guys get those if you don't already have them. Okay, so now that I've kind of laid the foundation, we're going to be moving into what is a victim advocate? What do we do? What do we stand for? What is our role? The basic tenets of advocacy are really important. These are the bare bones of what a victim advocate does. Obviously, we do a whole heck of a lot more, but this is to its core what a victim advocate is. First and foremost, we listen and believe our client. I said earlier that clients do not have to prove to you that something terrible happened to them to receive your support. And that is an awesome thing. I can, as a victim advocate, I have the ability to encourage, support, love, empower every single survivor who walks through my door, no matter what their history is, no matter what their story is, because I believe everybody who walks in my door. Now, I understand that as a human being, you may have some questions in the back of your head when you're working with survivors. It is, again, we're all curious Georges in our real lives. I understand that. However, when you are with that survivor, no matter what, you listen and you believe. The healing power in believing a survivor and telling them, vocalizing to them, I believe you, is so important. It is so healing right then and there, because we know one of the number one reasons a survivor doesn't come forward is because they are feared that they will not be believed. Society is set up to not believe survivors. As screwed up as that is, it is the truth. So when a survivor does have the courage and the ability to come forward and say something and tell you what happened to them, being able to tell them, I believe you, starts that healing process right away. And it is beautiful. We show respect in actions and our words. Again, no matter what, our clients are going to be going through a roller coaster of emotions. They're going to get angry. They're going to get sad. And we're going to be that safe person. So they're going to vent this frustration, this anger, this sadness to us. All the yuck emotions that they feel, we're going to feel it as well. But through all of that, we still show as the utmost respect to our survivors. We provide support in a nutshell. We do that in a million different ways, which I will get through toward the end of my presentation. But ultimately, that's what we do. We support them in any way possible that we can. I always tell everybody, like at Fairhaven, we do everything we can. And if a grant will pay for it, great. If a grant won't pay for it, we're going to find a way to pay for it if that means it's going to support our survivors. Very rarely does my executive director tell me no when I'm thinking outside of the box of ways to support these survivors. We have to get creative sometimes. We really have to lean on our community sometimes. But 9 times out of 10, we're able to find a way to support that client no matter what it means. We help facilitate decision-making. If you remember, one of the myths that I spoke about at the beginning of this presentation was that victim advocates will impede the investigation. We're going to speak for the victims, tell them what to do. That, again, could not be more opposite than the truth. Facilitating decision-making is one of the biggest jobs of a victim advocate. We will provide our survivors with all of their options. So for example, if I'm working with a 20-year-old survivor and they come to the hospital and they don't know what to do, I'm going to go over all of their options. We can just get you medically checked and on your way. We don't have to have a medical forensic exam. We don't have to talk to law enforcement. We can just get you checked, get you some meds, and be on your way. We can have this medical forensic exam done. We can have law enforcement come out, get you checked, get you your meds. You can make your police report and begin that role. Or we can have this evidence collected. We won't call law enforcement and we'll do an anonymous exam, and I will explain all of that to them. I give them all 3 options. As a victim advocate, I don't care which option they choose. I'm here to support whatever decision they make. So if they say, okay, I'm going to do the anonymous exam, let's go ahead that route. Awesome, great, wonderful. Now I'm going to support you, empower you, and help you get through what that entails. We get to not ever make a decision for our client, but we get to support them in whatever decision it is that they make. And sometimes that means sitting down and breaking down the pros and cons for each of their options, which can be time consuming, but is an important role as an advocate. Of course, we maintain confidentiality. I've already hit on that and the importance of it, so I'm not going to continue on that. We do not judge. Again, if you in your real life are as judgmental as I tend to be sometimes, that is, I mean, we're human. We judge people. I understand that. We try not to, and all of us say that we don't. But in your head, you have judged someone in your life. But with our survivors, we get to turn that judgment off. We're not judging anything about them. We are here to meet them where they're at and get them whatever support they need. And the most important part of a victim advocate is maintaining healthy boundaries. This is something that I continue to work on in my real life, in my professional life. Boundaries are the foundation of being a healthy, empowering, wonderful, amazing victim advocate. When I first started back in 2015, I thought that being a great, wonderful, amazing victim advocate meant that I was always available to my survivors, that I would drop what I'm doing, do whatever I had to do 100% of the time on my off time and my nights and my weekends and my holidays. And then I almost burnt out because as a victim advocate, I think I've been told, I don't know this for a fact, so don't quote me. But I'm pretty sure victim advocates have anywhere from like a 4 to 6, 5 to 7 year shelf life as an advocate because we burn out so quickly. We work in a very high stress, very dark, gross world of sexual violence. It's not fun. We don't get to see much beauty in it, right? So if you are overworking and being constantly available to your survivors, you're going to burn out. So healthy boundaries for me looked like changing the language I used. And this is a huge tip for anybody who's doing crisis intervention or working boots on the ground directly with survivors. I've changed the language I use with my survivors from me to we. I stopped saying, I am always available. Call me if you need me. Don't forget that you can always call me 24/7. I am always available. No, Becca Emerson likes her time off. Becca Emerson likes to take vacations. I don't want you calling me when I'm in line at Disney World. However, Fairhaven, the agency I work for, works 24/7. They are always equipped and ready to handle any crisis that comes through the door. I have advocates available to you 24/7. If you need anything, you can always call Fairhaven and you can talk to the advocate that is available. And I promise you that advocate will call me at the appropriate time and let me know what's going on. So I've changed from me to we, and I encourage you all to do that because we as individuals are not available 24/7, but advocates at a 24-hour crisis center are available 24/7. So that is something I just want to see. That's tangent number 2. Okay, continuing. The victim advocate works very many jobs, and this is a standard in our sexual assault response team standards and best practices that are available to Lake County. And it basically says that a sexual assault victim advocate will be provided to any victim of sexual assault for the opportunity to have the support of a victim advocate prior to and during all medical and legal proceedings and throughout the entire legal and healing process. So this little pie chart guy over here shows the 4 ways that a victim advocate is available to our survivors, whether that be through our crisis line, through medical advocacy at the bedside in a hospital, through judicial advocacy throughout the judicial process, whether that be through law enforcement or courts, and then the continuing spectrum of healing. I'm going to break down all 4 of those and spend just a smidge of time on each of those 4 components because that's, again, what makes up an advocate at a rape crisis center. Crisis intervention is typically what you're going to be providing your clients when you first meet them. Whether this be an acute client of or an acute survivor of sexual trauma or trafficking, and they are currently in or just left this abusive situation or horrible, terrible event just happened, or if this is somebody who for the first time is ready to ask for help. This is somebody for the first time calling your agency. Holy moly, that takes so much courage to be able to do that. So you're going to be providing some crisis intervention during that time as well. I want to just note that crisis intervention targets the response of the individual and not the actual crisis. So crisis kind of what happened, the trauma, the event has already happened. We're not focusing on that trauma, that event. We are focusing on specifically the response, the trauma response that your survivor is having to the event that happened to them. So why does it work? Crisis intervention works because first and foremost, it establishes a sense of safety. When I'm working with a survivor and they are in a complete crisis, so that looks different to very many people, but let's go with somebody is in crisis, they just walked through the door, holy crap, I was just assaulted, I don't know what to do. I'm able to sit with them, ground them, get them some water, and remind them that they are now safe and that I'm here to support them in any way possible. So once I'm able to ground them, I'm able to show them that they are safe and that they have a safe person now in their corner. And when I'm able to do that, the clients are able then to move forward with what's coming, what's next, because we are calming that victim down. When you walk into a hospital room, an intake room, you're speaking to somebody on the phone. A lot of the times they're up here in crisis and you have to bring them down. And we do that by talking in a soft advocate voice, allowing them the space and place they need to vent or cry or scream or do whatever it is that they need to do. And then they're going to come way up here and you're going to talk in your advocate voice again, and you're going to bring them back down. By being able to do this, it instills a sense of being able to solve problems for themselves. So even though you are probably meeting these people on what is one of their top 2 or 3 worst days of their life, and they might not have ever been through anything as terrible or horrible as it is that they've been through in this, during this time, they've been through a bad day before. And we're able to remind them, I understand that this is the worst day and this is the worst experience you've ever had, but we've all had bad experiences before. So what did you do during the last bad experience that worked for you that maybe we can try doing again? We're able to then help them solve these problems by facilitating that decision making, reminding them, empowering them that, yes, you can do this. I'm here to support you, and we will talk about it for as long as you need before you can make it. Oh, I just did it again. Sorry, I keep fast forwarding. Before you make a decision that is best for you. We also are able to walk in and establish a social support. When I walk in the door, to any of the doors that I walk in to meet with a survivor, I'm not just putting Becca in their corner. I'm putting Fairhaven Rape Crisis Center in their corner. And by putting Fairhaven Rape Crisis Center in their corner, I've just put 17 of me in their corner who are here to support them 24/7. And then if we get to that point where a survivor is able to come to a support group in our agency, now I've just put other peer survivors in their corner who they can then rely on and lean on. And all of this fosters hope, because I'm sure all of us have been through something dark, something horrible, something terrible, that you feel this darkness and it becomes so heavy and overpowering, and you can't possibly think that anything is ever going to get better. But by walking in, meeting them in that dark, meeting them in that yuck, and saying, hey, this sucks. I understand that it's really dark and deep right now, but one day it's not going to be this dark and deep. One day we are going to be able to walk out of this dark and deepness together. It inspires this hope that keeps our survivors going, because they know that one day they're not going to feel this yucky as they do today. Some important notes about a crisis is that most individuals who are exposed to a traumatic event, have a traumatic event happen to them, will not need formal psychological intervention. Last year we served 103 survivors in a hospital, I believe, maybe 109. I think it was 109. Something like that. Somewhere between 103 and 109 survivors in a hospital. And of those 103 or 109 hospital calls, maybe half of them wanted follow-up services, needed long-term services, needed individual sessions or support group or anything like that. Because most people just need that crisis intervention. We're able to get them back to their normal adaptive functioning. And then they're able to recognize, okay, I do have a support system. I do have the tools I need to get through this. That's going to be great. Awesome. That's what we hope for our survivors. Normalization of the crisis response is to be encouraged, but should never lead you to dismiss serious reactions. So you are going to hear me say, every reaction is a normal reaction to an abnormal event, because even though this event is very abnormal, the reactions that our survivors are having are very normal. However, there are a few that you will recognize are not normal and should be dismissed, or even said like, hey, that's normal, you're going to be okay type stuff. Somebody who's facing suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, and is normal to think, I could kill the guy who did this to me. It is not normal to say, okay, I know I have a gun at home, so I'm going to go get that gun and go to this person's house and shoot them. That's not a normal reaction. So we want to make sure that we're not dismissing serious reactions to this event that happened. Crisis intervention should always be voluntary. When we go to a hospital we always make sure that our clients in that room are comfortable with us being there, that they want us there. And we always give them the permission to dismiss us if that's not what they want. Same thing, we've had an influx of like 18, 19-year-old clients whose moms have been calling for them. Because they're over the age of 18, we really need to talk to that person, that individual. So when it's the mom or the dad or the loved one that calls and brings that person in, we always kick that support person out and make sure that this client really does want the services that they are requesting, and that it's okay if they don't as well, because we want to make sure that they know that all of our services are always voluntary. We don't want to interfere with natural recovery and coping mechanisms. We want to add additional healthy coping mechanisms to their bucket, to their platter, but we don't want to interfere with whatever is natural to them. And we do not want to ever make somebody talk about or relive the event unless they are comfortable doing so. Again, we don't need to know their story, or nothing needs to be proven to us in order to support them. Always, 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 when in doubt, seek assistance. I tell my team this all of the time. I would rather you call me 50 times and ask 50 different questions than not call me and make a mistake. Mistakes are going to happen. We are humans, absolutely. But if you are ever faced with a situation that you've never seen before, that you need clarification on, that you need direction for, I can guarantee your supervisors are going to say, for the love of God, call me. So always, always seek assistance, because a lot of the work that we do with our survivors is very individualized, very independent, but you want to make sure that you're leaning on your team when needed. Crisis line advocacy is a lot of the times the first way we get to know our clients. This is the first avenue that they seek out. I'm sure if you guys have a crisis line, you guys have your own protocols, but some basic foundational things are to, of course, introduce yourself, use your first name and request theirs. If they choose to give you their name, I'm somebody who's terrible at names. I will use their name multiple times throughout the call so that I don't forget their name, because I'm really bad at names, to be honest. While you're on that crisis line, as soon as you get their name, you want to establish safety, make sure that where they're calling from is safe and that they don't need you to call 911 on their behalf. Then you're going to move into using effective listening skills, using those communication techniques, finding out whatever their immediate concerns are. What was the main reason that they were calling? If this is somebody who is calling because they're an acute survivor, this happened within the last 5 days, okay, we're going to go over what sexual assault response team services they're eligible for. What are their rights as a victim advocate or as a victim? What does medical evidence look like? What does making a police report look like? We're going to encourage them, but not force them to go to a hospital, even if they don't want evidence collected, just to get checked out and make sure there's no injuries. We're going to go over all of those decisions with them and help them come to a decision on the phone. We're going to hope for an acute survivor that the end game is going to be that they're going to be going to a hospital and we're about to dispatch an advocate. However, we do know that that's not always the case. If a client is adamant about not going to a hospital, I'm going to encourage them to come into the office as soon as possible, because then maybe when they put a face to a name, we're able to introduce them to the advocate, and I'm able to say, this person is going to go with you right now. They will follow you to the hospital. They'll be with you every step of the way. Maybe that will encourage them to get to that hospital. Again, I just want to make sure that they're okay, first and foremost. Sexual violence, a lot of the times doesn't result in any injuries, but sometimes there are injuries, especially internal, that need to be checked out. So we always want to make sure our clients are treated medically if they are able to do so. Some clients don't want to do that though, and that's totally fine. We respect whatever decision it is that they make on that phone. Encourage them to call back, encourage them to come in for an intake, whatever that looks like. Sometimes people just need to vent. The medical advocacy model that we use for medical advocacy is the SAFE-R model. Again, it's from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, which was founded by George Everly and Jeffrey Mitchell back in 1995. This is a model that is used across the nation for crisis intervention for first responders of like major like natural disasters and those types of things. But the training is fantastic, and we use it and adapted it at Fairhaven. The 5 stages of the SAFE-R model is stabilization, acknowledgement, facilitation of understanding, encouraging effective coping, and the restoration of adaptive normal functioning or a referral. I'm not going to go into super crazy details about this, but it is super important. We're going to go into that in just a second. Some notes from a seasoned advocate who have been on a lot of hospital calls, aka me. These are just important things to keep in mind and remember. First and foremost, when you go to a hospital, you want to bring response bags if your agency provides them. We have go bags in our cars. All of our advocates have them that contain 5 different sizes of clothing, both male and female. These response bags have t-shirts, sweatpants, underwear, bra, boxers, socks, toiletries, whatever, in all these different sizes, so that our survivors, no matter who they are able to leave the hospital in clean, fresh clothes. All of our response bags are brand new clothing, and they are donated to us by our community, which is wonderful. We also bring resources. So we have a resource packet that is in every one of those response bags that we go over with all of our survivors with some general resources. We want to make sure that you have your paperwork, whatever your intake process looks like for your agency. Make sure you have that paperwork in your bag. And you want to make sure you have your badge when you're walking into a hospital or a police station. I always make sure my badge is faced inward. You never know who's waiting in the waiting room. Nobody needs to know who you are and what you're there to do. Where you're going to report at the hospital, 99.9% of the time you're going to the ER, unless you are told otherwise. We have responded to the behavioral health unit. We've responded to labor and delivery. We've responded to the ICU. It all depends on where the exam is going to take place. But if you're not told otherwise, go to your ER. And the most important thing from a seasoned advocate like myself, eat before you go. Because most exams, most hospital calls take anywhere from 4 to 7 hours. You're going to get hungry when you're there. So eat before you go. Our shortest call has lasted us 30 seconds, but our longest call by my friend Kyle lasted 17 and a half hours in a hospital. We did bring him food and coffee, but you never know how long you're going to be at the hospital. So always eat before you go. Pack some granola bars or some peanuts or something in your bag so that you have a snack if you need to. I've left the room when my client has been asleep or changing or whatever to go run to the bathroom. Really, it was to go run to the vending machine to stuff a Snickers in my mouth. Always eat before you go, because you're going to get hungry. And for me, it's always around the fingernail scrapings. I don't know what it is. By the time we get to that part of the exam, I usually get hungry. And then you're like in it to win it at this point. There's no sneaking out to stuff a Snickers in your mouth. So eat before you go. So going back to the SAFE-R model, which is the first part, stabilization. You're walking in that room. You are meeting your survivor for your first time. You are going to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Becca. I'm the victim advocate from Fairhaven. Did anybody tell you I was coming? Yes, or no, they didn't. Okay, great. Can I explain to you who I am and what my role is here? Would that be okay with you? Absolutely, Becca, go right ahead. Boom, introduction. I just told them who I am and where I'm from. Then I'm going to move into my limitations. I'm going to make sure they know that I work for an outside agency known as Fairhaven Rape Crisis Center, that I work for them. I don't work for the hospital. I don't work for the police. I work for that survivor to provide them with emotional support, resources, and whatever else they may possibly need from me in that moment. I'm going to let them know that everything they talk to me about is completely confidential due to IC code 35376. However, if I'm made aware of suicidal intent or ideation, homicidal intent or ideation, or child abuse, elderly abuse, or differently abled abuse or neglect, I am mandated by the state of Indiana to report that to the local authorities. Other than that, everything you talk about stays with me. Do you have any questions about that? Boom, just went over all the limitations with them. After they say no, I immediately always ask them, do you have any questions right away for me? Is there anything I can get you or answer for you before we begin? And they're going to say yes or no. And then boom, I'm going to move into rapport. I'm going to start establishing that rapport with them. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been here? Are you sure you don't need anything? Another thing that we like to do to establish rapport is pick something out that they are wearing, that they have on, that you can compliment. Wow, your hair is a really beautiful color. I love that color. Your glasses are awesome. I wish my glasses looked like that. You're going to pick something out and be genuine about it and that you really like that. Compliment them on that. And then you're going to move into the next role. So typically, if we were in person, this is where I would have you turn to your partner and practice a 2-minute commercial. That 2-minute commercial is that introduction, your limitations, and how you're going to establish rapport with your survivor. Because we're on Zoom and you don't have a neighbor right now. I mean, you guys have actual neighbors, but like nobody is sitting right next to you going through this training. We're not going to practice our 2-minute commercial. I do encourage you, if you don't already have one, to come up with one. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Because practicing and practicing and practicing is going to make it more natural when you go into a hospital room. After you've introduced yourself, gone over those limitations, and have started to build rapport, you're going to move into the acknowledgement phase. During this part of the hospital call, you are going to let but don't make a client share their story. Oftentimes, when you walk in the door, let's go with you're responding to a 15-year-old male in the hospital. Okay. You walk in, but before you walk in that door, this survivor has probably, at least in my experience, this is how it goes for most teens who end up in the hospital. They've probably reported to a friend. So that's person number one. That friend either encourages them or goes to somebody on their behalf to report to a safe person in the school. So let's say guidance counselor. So now that's the second person they've told. Guidance counselor, 9 times out of 10, calling school resource officer right away. So SRO is coming over and now they know what's going on. SRO and guidance counselor are calling parents. So that's let's just go with 4. It's a single parent. Single parent comes to the hospital, to the school, they pick up the kid, they take them straight to the hospital. So from there, 15-year-old is telling the mean triage or the mean front desk lady, the triage nurse, the triage doctor. Then they're moved into a room. And from in that room, they're telling their assigned nurse, the assigned doctor. Now the SANE walked in. Now law enforcement's there. Now DCS is there. So before you even walk in the door, there is a chance that this client, this 15-year-old boy who's in front of you, has already had to tell 12 people his story repeatedly, over and over and over again. And you're going to learn throughout your module on the neurobiology of trauma that is very re-traumatizing, very re-victimizing for a survivor. So when I walk in the door, this person is probably going to see me as another professional that they have to tell their story to. So this is going to be one of the only places that I interrupt the client, and I'm going to say, listen, if you want to talk about what happened, if you want to share with me your experience, I am absolutely here to listen, to support you, to allow you to vent. But if you don't want to have this conversation, if you don't want to talk about it, and you just want to talk about the new season of you, I am okay with that. I am not somebody who needs to know. And then I've put that ball in their court and allowed them to either talk about what happened with them or to say, no, I really don't want to talk about it anymore. And I just want to talk about the new season of you with you. Great. Wonderful. See how we are facilitating decision-making. We're supporting our survivors and empowering them. I am not somebody who needs to know in order for you to get my support. During this stage of, the crisis intervention model that we follow, we are going to have to start formulating an acute intervention plan. So this can happen, just throughout conversation. Did you drive yourself here? Did somebody bring you? Oh, okay, yeah, an ambulance brought you. Okay, do you have anybody in the waiting room for you? Is there anybody that we can call together to get you some support? because we want to know, how is this person getting home? Is this person even safe to go home? And if they're not safe to go home, we have to find them a safe place to go. So we got to find out if they have any loved ones in the area, if they have any safe friends that they can stay with. Do they need a shelter for the night or two or forever? We want to start establishing that so that we can start making phone calls. I don't know how it works in your area, but in order to get an okay for bed space in our local domestic violence shelters, especially in the middle of the night where phone calls have to be made to supervisors and stuff, that process can take a little bit. So we want to find that all out a little early on in the hospital call. Same thing with a ride home. Some of our hospitals have med cars or other ways to get clients home that are safer than a Lyft or an Uber, which is what Fairhaven can provide. Unfortunately, that's all we got. But if you've ever had to wait for a med car in a hospital, sometimes those take 3 or 4 hours. So if this client is going to need a ride home, we're going to want the nurse to know that sooner rather than later so that they can get on getting that service ready. Also, a very important part of this hospital call is to be tolerant of silence. Again, if we're talking about that 15-year-old boy who's already talked to 12 different people, he may just love the fact that he has a safe person in the room and he can just process. There are some people like me who is a verbal processor. If I go through something or if something's on my mind, I need to talk about it. I need to share it with somebody. I need to have their opinion. I need to just put it out there. There are other people who are not like me, who are an internal processor. They don't want to talk about it. They need to figure it out in their brain by themselves. So we want to be respectful of that. We move into the facilitation of understanding. We want to validate these clients' pain. We want to use paraphrasing and mirroring techniques. So if they are sharing with you what happened, or if this is the part of the exam where the narrative is happening and they're talking about these horrible, terrible things that happened to them, we want to make sure that we are showing this client in any way, shape, or form that we can, that we hear them, we see them, and that we're validating what they've been through. We're going to remind clients as many times as necessary that symptoms and reactions are normal reactions to a very abnormal, terrible, horrible thing that happened to them. We also want to dispel myths of vulnerability or going crazy. You're not going crazy. If you're a client, and I've had those who go from crying to laughing to numbness to laughing to crying to wanting to punch someone, that is the roller coaster of emotions of all of the hormones that have been flooded with their body. You feel like you're going crazy, but I promise you you're not. And I've seen this before. And if needed, you want to assist family members and friends, because remember, if you're working with that 15-year-old boy and you do the best work possible, you don't victim blame, you empower them, you meet them where they're at and show them nothing but compassion and love, but they're going home with somebody who is victim blaming, who isn't being supportive, then all of the work that you've just done for the last 4 to 7 hours goes out the window, because they're going to go and they're going to listen to the one horrible, terrible thing that somebody has to say. So we want to support our family members and friends, the loved ones that our survivors are going to be going home with, and equip them with some things to say and how to be supportive, what to expect, and those types of things. We're going to move into the encourage effective coping. This is where we are going to kind of talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I will go back to the other slide in just a second. But unless these bottom 2 tiers of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met, their basic needs, they are not going to be able to move up. So in the hospital, we are providing them that bottom tier. We're providing them with water. So you're going to go and literally get them water. Always make sure that the buccal swabs of the forensic exam have already been done. If they haven't been done, make sure you go to a nurse and get their permission before you give them water, but give them water if that's what they need with the permission of the nurse and doctor. Same with food. If you're getting hungry as an advocate, they're probably getting hungry too, because I guarantee they didn't eat before they went to the hospital. So I know all of our nursing stations and our ERs have snackies in their little coolers. So get them some food. Always make sure your client eats something before they take the medication that they are given, because those meds are super heavy on the belly. You want to make sure they get some food in their system. We want to provide them with warmth. So I know where every single blanket warmer in every single hospital in Lake County is. So we're going to go get them some blankets and keep them nice and warm and rest. I cannot tell you the number of survivors whose door I sat in front of just so that they felt safe enough to sleep. By meeting all of those needs, now we're able to talk about safety with them. What is your safety plan? Do you have somewhere safe to go? If you have to go home, what can we put in place to make sure you're safe when you go home? By being able to meet these needs, then we're able to help them get to that next tier where healing techniques can take place. We want to equip them with those safety plans, those grounding techniques. We want to make sure that your crisis line is included in that safety plan. So what are you going to do when you go home tonight? What does tonight's plans look like? I, at this point, always encourage my clients that right now, today is a time to be selfish. So you want to go home and order your favorite food and put on your comfort movie in your coziest pajamas with the safe people in your life around you, and allow yourself to process and feel whatever it is you need to process and feel at this time. At this point, usually the exam is done. So we're going to be transitioning toward that discharge of the hospital. So we're making sure that they have a way home, that the place they're going is safe. All of those ducks are in a row. And again, you're going to do that safety plan with them in whatever way they may need. I encourage all of you, if you don't already, go through a training on safety planning. It's great to have that knowledge in the back of your head. It's required of all of the staff that I work with that we have some form of a safety plan in place with all of our survivors. The last stage of the SAFE-R model is the restoration of adaptive individual functioning or a referral. So before we leave the hospital, we want to make sure that we have a good contact number with them. We want to make sure that informed consent form, the intake paperwork, whatever it looks like or is called at your agency, is filled out with all of their contact information, because at Fairhaven, at least, we provide everybody with at least a 72-hour follow-up call. So sometimes clients require something sooner. Just come up with a time with your client. Hey, I want to check on you in a couple of days. I just want to let you know that we're going to be giving you a call just to see how you're doing. At that 72-hour follow-up call, I will reoffer services, because you threw so much information at that survivor in such a traumatic time. Chances are their trauma brain, they're not going to remember everything. So when I make that 72-hour follow-up call, or sooner, depending on what I agree with my survivor, I'm going to go over those again. Like, hey, don't forget, like, I can come with you to that follow-up police interview. You can come in here for sessions. We do have support groups, those types of things. And then the discharge happens. You walk out with your survivor. Pre-COVID, 99.9% of people hugged you. Post-COVID, it's like 50-50. So just remind them that you're in their corner, remind them of your crisis number, and then you leave and you're on your way. They're leaving and they're on their way. At the end of that, congratulations, you've just done a hospital call. Moving forward from the hospital call, we will provide judicial advocacy. Judicial advocacy is an umbrella term to provide all of these different services, which includes going with them to any law enforcement interviews that they have, whether they're making their initial report or a follow-up FAB or forensic interview, whatever it's called in your area. We will go with them to that. We will help them obtain protective orders by going with them to our local clerk's office and filling out all that paperwork with them. We will help them and support them while they write a victim impact statement, and then support them while they prepare it, whether that means practicing reading it and those types of things. A victim impact statement can be a very emotional time for our survivors, because it's the first time in a court session that they are able to have their voice actually be heard. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them in every way possible during that. We will go with them to the courtroom, and we will go with them to any meetings with our Lake County or any of our local prosecutor's office. When we go to the law enforcement agency, it's typically for a forensic interview, which best practice says is anywhere from 2 to 3 sleep cycles after the incident. We want to give them time to have that roller coaster of all those hormones kind of have time to flood through their body and make its way out before they have to give that interview. Sometimes if there is a danger to the community or a safety factor in place, they may have that FAB interview done a little bit earlier than that. But just generally speaking, it's usually any 2 to 3 days after the initial assault. When you're working with law enforcement, you want to make sure that you're working collaboratively with them and not combatively. Remember that you are a guest in their facility. Everywhere we go, we are guests, and we treat everywhere we go as such. We want to make sure that you're focusing on your client and not the case. You want to be watching for your client's emotional struggles. You want to be empowering them, supporting them, loving them however they need it in that moment, focusing 100% on them. We do not investigate anything we learn in the interview, and you may learn some things. Your victim may tell the law enforcement things that they haven't told you, and vice versa. We don't investigate anything that we hear in there. And if you have a question, I encourage you to ask the officer privately. If your client has a question, I encourage you to encourage your client to ask the officer. Make sure that that survivor leaves with all of their questions answered before they go. For orders of protection, we always encourage our clients to bring any documentation that they have, any evidence that they have. Police reports are always a big thing up here in Lake County to get that order of protection granted. We meet them at the courthouse, which is where our clerk's office is. We help them fill out that paperwork. Thankfully, our clerk's office has advocates there that help them and know that paperwork inside and out. But I do encourage you, if you don't know what an order of protection looks like, to get to know that paperwork just a bit. And we do not fill out the paperwork for them. This is, again, where we work on the empowerment model. They can fill out the paperwork for themselves as long as they do not have any disability that would stop them from being able to do that. Courtroom accompaniment is one of my favorite parts of being a victim advocate. But not everybody's. A lot of people get nervous in a courtroom. So just knowing what to expect before you go is super important. Make sure that you yourself are always focused on your victim. If your courts are ran anything like our courts, sometimes you get a show in that room and you're hearing all these different things and people arguing, and it's interesting if you're a true crime buff like me. But in that room, I am 100% focused on my survivor. Be aware of your surroundings all of the time. Be aware of any support people who may be there for the perpetrator. Be aware of where the perpetrator is. If your perpetrator has bonded out and they are in the courtroom with you, you want to be doing some body blocking. You want to make sure that you are keeping as much distance as possible between your victim and their assailant. You want to make sure you bring tissue and have a plan for after everything's done. So if I have a client and they are going to court for a sentencing hearing, we know that the sentencing hearing is happening. They're going to give their victim impact statement. There's going to be a lot of emotions. We're going to hear that this person is going to prison for however long they're going to go. We want to have a plan for after it's done. My plan always includes eating pizza. I love going out to eat with my clients afterwards and sharing a meal and just decompressing with them in a very neutral facility. But sometimes your survivors aren't into that. Maybe they don't want that. Maybe you guys just don't have that rapport. A lot of my survivors I've worked with for years at this point. So we go and have pizza. But ultimately, make sure that your survivor has something planned for that day. Taking the rest of the day off work, going home, eating their favorite food, snuggling in their favorite jammies, watching their favorite movie is always my favorite go-to to encourage my survivors to do. The victim impact statement, again, is written completely by your victim, and it can say whatever the victim wants it to say within limitations. But these are the main 5 different components that we give to our clients before they begin writing, is to talk about how the crime affected them and their family, the emotional impact of the crime, the financial impact of the crime, the physical impact of the crime. What are their recommendations for the court for sentencing, and anything else they want to tell the court. Again, this is their statement, and they get to say whatever they need to say for healing within that judicial system. Also, I just want to say a victim impact statement is great to work through with a victim who did not ever get their day in court. A victim impact statement can be a great healing tool. We've worked on victim impact statements with clients who've never even reported. And then we as a team at Fairhaven will come together and allow whichever survivor it is to make their victim impact statement to us, and love them and support them, because again, this is a great healing tool that they can use as well. Moving into supportive services, I want you to remember the 5 E's, which is to empathize. We want to make sure that they have a safe place to process their experience. We want to educate them and provide them with recovery tools that they need. Equip them and offer them different options, resources, and referrals. I refer to us as the resource queens and king, because we have a Kyle at Fairhaven, where if you need a resource and it's not in that resource packet, or Google isn't helping you, you call me. We will find you that resource. We might have to look outside the box and look outside the county, but we're going to find you that resource that you may need. We encourage, which is that the recovery process is possible. Again, going back to that facilitating and giving that survivor hope. A lot of the times our survivors don't believe that hope is possible. So we want to encourage them and help them walk that healing process as much as we can. And we entrust without judgment. Again, being non-judgmental is one of the key components of being a victim advocate. These are some other techniques that our executive director came up with, which is the reach technique. We want to reassure by telling them that they did amazing. We want to encourage them to keep working on whatever it is that they're working on. Tell them that you see them making progress. Right now, it's been super fun at Fairhaven. A shameless plug, we are hosting our inaugural masquerade event, which is going to be a huge gala, super fun, super high-end, really fancy stuff. But at this gala, we are highlighting one of the projects that we do at Fairhaven, which is the mask project. And the mask project used to begin, it's just an art project that we used to do with all of our survivors, where you have this mask and on the outside your survivors paint the facade that they put on while that abuse was happening, or during that healing process. And then on the inside, you paint the pain that you were feeling during that abuse or that part of the healing process. So we've expanded upon this mask project, and now we have 5 different masks that we've invited some of our long-term clients who have really worked on their recovery process to participate in this as a way to highlight and showcase the journey of healing, and without asking or exploiting them, asking them to get up at a podium and tell their story and all the nitty-gritty details. We don't want to do that, but we want to highlight what that healing journey has looked like for our survivors. And so I'm the chairperson of this event, and I get to be the one who's inviting our survivors to be a part of this process, and being able to sit down with some of our clients and find out where they see themselves on this healing journey, and being able to applaud them for the progress that they've made in the year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years that they've been working with us and on themselves has just been so amazing. Because your survivors, they they feel like this is just their life, they're living it, they're not making any progress. But when you're able to say, whoa, look at this, look at what you just did, look at how you reacted to this now versus how you would have reacted a year ago, it's such a cool thing to experience with your survivors. So I always encourage y'all to encourage your survivors and show them and help them see the progress that they're making in their recovery. You want to ask them for what they need and remind them that it's okay to not be okay, and that healing is not linear. There are not check boxes that you're going to check off to make like, oh, now I'm healed, look at that. That's not how it works. So you want to remind them of that. And when they have what they think is a setback, you're able to encourage them. I've had some survivors I have one whose daughter just disclosed that something had happened to them a long time ago. And she's like, I'm all the way back at the beginning. What am I going to do? La, la, la. And I'm able to sit there with them and be like, hey, You're not back at the beginning, because now you have a foundation of recovery. You have healing tools. You are now able to take what you know and encourage your daughter with those same healing and recovery tools. We're able to remind them that it's okay that you're not okay right now, but just because you're not okay right now doesn't mean you're all the way back in the beginning either. The C of reach is to call the crisis line or somebody that they trust if they need to talk. So you want to, every time a client is walking out my door, I always tell them, don't forget the crisis line is available to you. And we want to inspire that hope again, teach them that they have to take it one day at a time, and that they are not alone in this process, and that your agency is there for them for whatever they may need. While you're meeting with your survivors, you want to check in on a couple different things. First and foremost, are they participating in their daily life? Are they eating right? Are they drinking their water? Are they going to school or work like normal? Are they doing what they need to do every day in their daily life? And if they are not, that is okay, but we have to come up with a plan to get them back to that normal stuff. Are they using their coping mechanisms that they either already know or that they are learning with you? Are they practicing them when they are having a hard time? Are they completing their homework assignments? I used to never give homework assignments. Now I give homework assignments like no one's business, because I want to make sure that my survivors are practicing the tools that we are working through in our sessions. Are they able to recognize and express emotion like the right way? And are they able to identify the difference between what is feeling, what is fact, and what is a fear? That is an excellent tool to teach somebody and to help them learn. Like, I feel X, Y, and Z. Okay, you are feeling that way, but that is not a fact. So let's talk about the facts here. You're feeling very discouraged. You're feeling very sad in that you are to blame, but the facts of the matter are you are not to blame. This is not your fault. All of the shame lies with the person who did this to you and not on you. I have to touch briefly on suicidal ideation, because this is something that does come up when you're working with survivors of sexual violence. The likelihood that a person suffers from suicidal or depressive thoughts increases after sexual violence. 94% of women who are raped experience some form of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms during the first 2 weeks following the rape. PTSD cannot be diagnosed by a victim advocate, nor can it be diagnosed within the first 2 weeks, but the symptoms are very similar. It's also known as rape trauma syndrome in the first couple of weeks. 30% of women report PTSD symptoms up to 9 months after their sexual assault. 33% of women who are raped contemplate or have suicidal ideation. And 13% of women who are raped face attempted suicide or suicidal intent. And approximately 70% of rape and sexual assault victims experience moderate to severe distress, which is a larger percentage of any other violent crime. If you do not already have a suicide, my Siri's talking to me. I'm so sorry about that, guys. If you do not have a protocol in place at your agency for somebody who is experiencing suicidal intent or ideation, I really encourage you to talk to your supervisors and your leadership team about getting one in place. We do not have this happen very often at our agency, but it happens enough for us to make sure that we have plans in place. I require my staff to go through training at a minimum of 3 times a year. Because this is not something that we do every day, but we cannot mess it up at the same time. So get the outside trainings from the different agencies that provide it. There's QPR. We personally use the SAFE-T method. The SAFE-T method is also from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. Find something that works for you and your agency and have a protocol in place, because I would rather you have it and not need it than need it and not have it. The other types of supportive services that we offer at Fairhaven are support groups. We have 5 support groups running, I believe, right now. We will be launching a 6th one soon. So we have our curriculum-driven support groups. This one is a support group that I really encourage our long-term survivors to go to, because this is a curriculum-driven support group. So they choose a book. It almost becomes like a book club. They read a couple chapters every week. They work through some of the questions in that book. But the thing about the curriculum group is that it really helps you maintain some progress in your recovery and propels you into the next part of your growth. this is a support group where our clients are coming and committing to 12 weeks of a support group where we close that group so that they are able to become each other's support network. And this allows them to make a commitment to themselves for their recovery. And every one of these groups, they build their own support network in that group. But like I said, this is not, at least at Fairhaven, the way we run it. These are not groups that are for somebody brand new to recovery, because they are very challenging curriculum. So we really like to keep these for our survivors who are ready for that. We do have an open support group though, which I encourage everybody to go to. Our open support group is hosted on Friday afternoons, and we use the self curriculum. It never fails. After every Core 40 presentation, I have somebody reach out and ask me about the self curriculum. The curriculum can be found at that website at the bottom. It is a very expensive curriculum, but it is worth it. It is a curriculum that goes through 4 different sections: safety, emotions, loss, and the future. Each lesson every week is independent of every other lesson, so clients can jump in whenever they can. It doesn't like build upon each other. They don't have to go to every session in order to get the lesson. And it's a psychoeducational support group. So they are taught a concept, they work through a worksheet on that concept, and then they're given a handout that explains that concept a little bit more, usually by some type of peer journal article or something like that, to give them more information. It is not, when you look at it, it is not the most exciting curriculum, but it works. And it works beautifully. It provides clients with that basic foundations of safety planning, how to manage emotions, how to deal with different types of losses, and how to plan for their future. It really is a beautiful curriculum. I highly, highly recommend it. We also offer family and community support from Fairhaven. We will provide individual services for primary and secondary survivors. So this will give us the opportunity to support parents if their kiddos are the ones who are going through it. And we also provide support for different spouses and partners, depending on who this person is and what that partner may need. We do go out into the community. We provide community education and outreach to anybody who asks us to do it. We have a fantastic prevention and education department that goes into the schools and provides body safety lessons and conversations with age appropriate curriculum. And they are fantastic and phenomenal, and they are doing some fantastic work to start having these conversations with these kiddos. We also will provide community crisis response. We did have a few different incidents that have happened up here that not just affected one family or 2 families, that affected an entire community. So we are able to provide that community crisis response as well. And that's Aspen. We have a therapy dog at our office. Aspen just turned 8, so she is on the cusp of retirement. But if y'all have the funds and ability to get a therapy dog, I highly recommend it. We're able to provide our clients with some very unique support and comfort. Aspen is fantastic. And they're able to provide them with any support during, before, and after any type of session or support group. I've had Aspen during COVID, when all of our courts were online. Aspen was able to be with me and one of my kiddo clients, a little gal, she was 6, while her father got sentenced, and we were able to watch it in the comfort of Fairhaven with Aspen next to her, playing with her, loving on her, and it really made the experience a little bit more positive for this young kiddo. So I really encourage you guys to get a therapy dog if you don't already have one, or if you have the ability to get one. And if you have any questions about Aspen, because this is another place I get a lot of questions on, I am not the person to answer. Our executive director, Kelly, is Aspen's handler, and she could walk you through how she did it, who she went through, where she got her certified, the whole shebang. I don't have those answers, unfortunately. And with that being said, I am officially done. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And now is the time to answer some questions. I'm going to start with the chat. And then if y'all want to unmute, or if you guys have any other questions, I'm here to answer them. Let's see, what do we got here? Names are challenging. Yes, they are. Does the social worker at the hospital also work with the team? I personally have not seen a social worker at the hospital. We have had a social worker help when we've had instances where our shelters are full, client can't go home and is unsafe. So we do work with our social workers on that aspect. But 9 times out of 10, no, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen a social worker. That is here in my experience, though, in Lake County, not necessarily all around the world. Okay, and then there's some questions about Aspen. I'm gonna drop Kelly's. That is Kelly's email. Oh, that's sent to a direct person. I'm sorry. I don't know how to work Zoom. You would think by now I would, but still. Okay. So, oh. Oh, well, dang. Now they're saying, I'm so sorry that that website does not have the self curriculum. I know we just purchased a new one. Let me. That was the website that I saw. If you want to, let me put my email in here. If you're interested in the self curriculum, we just purchased the newer updated version of it, rcc.org. I can get you in contact with the people who created self, because again, it's a fantastic curriculum. Does anybody else have any questions? You can either throw it in the chat or unmute. If not, or if you don't think, oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Emily. If you do not have any questions, or if you would prefer to email me, that's totally fine. I'm here and available. I would love to help you guys in any way, shape, or form. But with that being said, Mariah, I believe I am all done.